Hey, how's everybody doing today? So I wanted to bring a couple things to you all's attention. Uh, I'm going to make this quick. I don't want to drag this recording out for too long. So there are two things. First of foremost, I want to bring to your attention, and there's two phrases. The first phrase is abusive process, and the second phrase is malicious prosecution. Now, first, I'm going to define abusive process. Now, according to uh, Cornell Law, law.cornell.edu, abusive process has been described as misusing a quote criminal or civil process against another party for a purpose different than the proceeding's intended purposes, end quote, and thereby causing the party damages, in parentheses, e.g., arrest, seizure of property, or economic injury, in parentheses. So that's the first that I wanted to bring to your attention, the abusive process. These are elements that you can use in a tort claim or a civil suit in federal district court under Title 42, Section 1983. And just keep in mind, I'm not giving you legal advice or any advice really in general. I'm just giving you information. It's just something for you to think about, some information for you to validate on your own, and for you to digest and figure out how you might be able to use it for your own situation that you find yourself in. So, uh, secondly, I'm going to define the malicious prosecution. And according to law.cornell.edu, malicious prosecution is the filing of a lawsuit for an improper purpose and without grounds or probable cause. The lawsuit may either be civil or criminal in nature. To remedy an act of malicious prosecution, an alleged victim files a tort claim by the same name. So it would be a tort claim under malicious prosecution. And that would be one of the elements that would fall under a Title 42, Section 1983 in the Federal Code suit that would be filed in federal district court. Um, so those two situations there, if you find yourself in any court case, any hearing or suit being brought against you, especially when there is no injured party, when you haven't actually hurt anybody physically or hurt their property or caused damage to their property and caused a financial loss, um, there is no suit that would fall under malicious prosecution, uh, as well as abusive process, especially when the so-called prosecutor is representing an imaginary friend. For example, in the court case that I found myself in, where a suit was being brought against me maliciously, it came to my attention after the fact that the prosecutor was representing the quote unquote all capital name state of Ohio. So if I was to go into a courthouse or go anywhere um, within the state and ask to speak to the state of Ohio, there is no man or woman or actual real person that could speak that is named the state of Ohio. There are only authorized representatives of the quote unquote state of Ohio. And so, what these people are doing when they're acting on behalf of the all capital state of Ohio is they're acting on behalf of an imaginary friend. And they are assuming, based on what limited information that they have authorization and jurisdiction to bring the suit. But in reality, the only reason that they do that is because we, the people, don't know the truth. At least most of us, anyway, don't know the truth about the situation in the courts and what they're actually doing, and the fact that there really is no criminal proceedings. They call it criminal, but in commerce, everything is civil. There are only civil suits. So they use terms like criminal and other terms to scare us, to make us think we did something wrong, and they have the authority to make it right and punish us and fine us and force us to pay restitutions or sit in jail or prison for God knows how much time and waste our lives away because they are simply profiting from it. When you break down what happens in a court, not the theatrics and what you see in the hearings and so forth, and in the trials where it's the Perry Mason situation where you get up and give your defense, and all that nonsense. That's all theatrics. That's just a play, whether rehearsed or not. That's just a play to obfuscate the true meaning of the court and the true meaning of the case and what's being done. What they don't want you to know is that while they're busy distracting us with all these theatrics, they are creating bonds. And, on the face of it, many of us might realize, okay, well, they issue bonds such as performance bonds with appearance or whatever the type of bond that's created, like a release bond, an OR bond, or these types of bonds to for conditions of release or what have you. These are bonds that are created that are sold on the open market for profit. So when you boil it all down, that's all these procedures are. They're administrative procedures where these bankers are creating bonds. They are forcing us to comply and forcing us to accept the bonds because we don't know any better out of ignorance. And on top of that, on the backside of these cases, they are creating additional bonds, penal bonds, and other types of bonds that they're creating secondarily to the initial bonds, so that they can profit further. And essentially, what they're doing is creating fraudulent contracts, because the only way there can be a true contract is if there's a meeting of the minds and there's full disclosure. If I'm not fully informed of the situation, that is fraud. That is trickery and deceitfulness, and constitutes as a fraudulent contract. And in many situations, such as loans, for example, just real quick, I'll add this little bit of information that you can look up yourself and verify. Don't take my word for it. But loans, when we go into a financial institution and supposedly apply for a loan, the banks trick us into thinking that they are loaning us their money. Well, that's a lie. They don't have any money. Ever since 1933, when the gold standard was removed and we were no longer allowed to use gold or silver species for commerce, the government replaced the gold and silver species in legal tender with Federal Reserve notes, and they created this whole system to use basically certificates, negotiable instruments rather than actual precious metals or value. And so when you go into a bank or financial institution and quote unquote apply for a loan, what you're actually doing is, once you put your signature on a document that has an amount and that is turned into a contract, that application or agreement, if you're buying a car, you sign the contract that you're agreeing to. That contract with your signature on it is a negotiable instrument. That's worth the amount that's written on it. What these banks and financial institutions are doing is they are tricking us into thinking that we need to borrow from them, when in fact, they're borrowing from us, because we are the only ones that can create money in this situation, quote unquote, through the creation of negotiable instruments with our signature. It's our signature that gives the document value. The bank or financial institution has no value until we give it value. So I want you to consider these things. It's really no different from a court. All it is it's a matter of contracts, creating contracts, and acceptance or denial of presentments and that sort of thing. And then they capitalize. They exchange the negotiable instruments for Federal Reserve notes. They sell them off on the open market to whomever will buy them or exchange them. So I want you all to keep that in mind. And like I said, don't take my word for it. Look up the information yourself. There's plenty of information out there. You can read the actual codes for the state, the federal codes as well. Regarding these things, you can look up the UCC regulations, the Uniform Commercial Codes, regarding negotiable instruments, regarding bonds. Define these words and comprehend what it is that they're actually doing, because they're using doublespeak, mostly in the courts, but even in the banks, financial institutions, when it comes to loans and finances in general. Many of these organizations, these representatives acting on behalf of these organizations, I should say, they use doublespeak, and they use words that mean two different things. We're taught that they mean one thing, but in reality they mean something else. Like, for example, the word understand. When anyone asks you, especially in a so-called place of authority, if anyone asks you if you understand, what they're really asking you is if you stand under their authority. They're not asking if you comprehend what they're speaking or what they're talking about. That's what they want you to think, because most people will be like, oh yeah, I understand, I get you, I hear you, I know what you mean. That's not what they mean. What they mean is do you stand under my authority? Are you relinquishing all of your rights so I can tell you what your rights are and what they're not, and tell you what you can and can't do? That's what they mean by it. So when you get pulled over on the side of the road, they ask you if you understand why they pulled you over or whatever the situation might be. Hell no, I don't understand. If you give them the driver's license and they hold it up and say, "Is this you?" and you say, "Yes," you're telling them, you're testifying that you are that card. Well, last time I checked, that card doesn't have any rights. The card is an inanimate object and is not a living man or woman. And so once you assume the identity of that card, that driver's license, that state ID, whatever it is that you think that describes you and explains who you are, because of the doublespeak and because of the trickery, you don't realize that you just entered into a contract and you allowed that public servant to do whatever the hell it is that they want to do without any ramifications, because you allowed it, you accepted it. So I want you to keep that in mind. Be aware of reality. Be aware of what's really going on. And I know it's difficult because the Matrix is very real. Not in the concept, but the context of how Hollywood portrays it, or the theatrics of the movies, the Matrix and the series. It's not some other dimension that we get whisked into when we pick up a landline phone. The Matrix is a construct of our mind. It's in the minds of men. And not just, men as in guys, a man with a penis, but all men, because we are all men. You're either a man or a man with a womb man. We're all mankind. So, you'll have to remove your sensitive ideologies and cult-like upbringing, I guess. And be careful that you don't get offended at what I'm saying, because this is truth. Whether you like it or not, I don't care what you were taught, there are only two kinds of people: a man or a woman, a man with a womb. It's one or the other. It's pretty simple. When we start adding all these other things and playing make-believe, well, that's when you lose all your rights, because you fall out of the category of a living man or woman. And when you claim to be something other than a living man or woman, you fall under the category of commerce. You become a product. Now, whether or not the the laws are being changed or the codes are being changed or whatever regulations are being changed to include these people that are accepting these imaginary identities. Uh, that's neither here nor there. When you boil it all down, the only people that have standing are living. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. Or are a living man or a living woman. Period. So if I was to go into a court and claim that I'm a uh, I don't know, cousinette from the Addams family. Well, I can claim that all I want. I can say that all I want. It doesn't make a difference. According to the law, they don't recognize cousinette per se. Um, I mean, there's just so much more with that, and I could get into it. But I want you to just consider these things. And again, don't take my word for it. I'm not telling you all what to do. I'm not giving you legal advice or anything like that. I am just simply providing information for you all to consider. This is information that I am learning, and if I can impart some of that knowledge and wisdom onto you all, and help you all to comprehend what's really going on in this reality, then hey, that's a win. That's a win for us. So, with that being said, I encourage you all to educate yourselves, keep your heads up, and don't allow these tyrants, these traitors, these cowards, these schoolyard bullies to get the best of you. I know how frustrating it can be to deal with them at times because they act more like children than anybody else. They just want their way. They throw temper tantrums. They'll shoot and kill you if you don't do what they tell you to do. That's disturbing. So, just be aware of that. Be aware that when you find yourself interacting with these people, some of them might mean well. Some of them might actually do some good out there, but overall, most of these people are just ignorant. They don't realize what's really going on. They're just doing their job, and it's really unfortunate. But for us grown men and women that know who we are, that know how to stand up uh, and fight back. Not from a physical standpoint, but just from a standing, having a standing to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and tell these people they are wrong, and they're going to be held accountable for it, because there's no excuse for them acting like children or tyrants or traitors or cowards or schoolyard bullies, whatever adjective or title you want to put on them. There's no reason for it. There's no excuse for it. Just because we don't know any better doesn't allow them the authority. That is misconduct. That is malicious intent. Whether they realize it or not, again, ignorance is no excuse. They cannot use our ignorance against us. That's unlawful, and that is fraud. So just keep that in mind. If you find yourself in those situations, fraud has no statute of limitations. God bless you.